thought what we would do tonight is just kind of lay out really a long journey and try to make it condensed for you so I don't bore you to death. And talk a little bit about our history, Donato's, how my dad started on the south side of Columbus, how we grew it, how we sold to McDonald's, how we bought it back, how I was on Undercover Boss. Anybody see that? Yeah. And then talk a little bit about what I'm most recently involved with, which is my passion, and a lot of things that I'm excited about. And so, instead of watching the video, what I'd like to do is just start out talking about really my dad, because in writing this book, I have to tell you, this was not on my bucket list. I do not remember as a little girl ever saying, hey, I want to be an author. For any of you out in the audience that are, I commend you. It was a journey, and thanks to Debbie and most recently Paul Oddie, who helped me along in that process. And I just happened to be speaking one day. People sometimes are interested in why did you sell your family business, and then why did you buy it back? So after I got done speaking one time, a gentleman asked if I was going to write down that story. And honestly, in honor of my dad, I thought, okay, I owe it to him. Let's just start really trying to understand the legacy of my dad and why he went into business in the first place. So at the early age of actually 13, he was a paper boy, and he would go and knock on the doors, and he would ask people for money, right, because he delivered the paper. And then he got his very first job as a pizza maker in a pizza shop. And he went to work very early. Back then, at 13, you could still work. It wasn't covered under the minor labor law, so we weren't violating anything. And so he went to work at a very early age, and he grew up south side of Columbus, went to an all-boys school, Catholic. His dad, my grandpa, was in the military, very strong values in the home. And when he went to work, what he found out was that all those principles sometimes were being lived by the people that he worked around, and sometimes not necessarily so much. And so really at a very early age, what he found was that he knew he would one day want to go into business and bring his principles to work with him. So sometimes when he was 13, 14 years old, he would go into work, and one gentleman that he worked with was a man of great values and integrity and honesty, and everything he did with making sure that that product was the same for the customer every time, and making sure that he treated the associates right every single time. And so the other nights, my dad would go in, and the gentleman sometimes would water down the sauce so you can get more pizzas by the end of the night. Sometimes would skimp on the pepperoni so that you could get more pizzas by the end of the night. And if he didn't like the customers, sometimes he would make the pizza however he wanted. And so then sometimes he would take cash out of the register. And my dad's watching this, and he would go down to the bar, and he would bring women back into the restaurant. And my dad will tell way more stories than I put in the book, but he just remembers, my dad was an altar boy, and I'm not kidding, until he was 18 years old. So he was very value-driven. And when he started to experience a work environment where, the environment wasn't reflecting and wasn't aligned with his core values, he was conflicted, and he couldn't understand it. But what he saw at a very early age was the gentleman that treated the customers right and treated the neighborhood right and treated the associates right, that business started to grow. And so at 16, he went home to his dad, my grandpa, and he's like, I have this opportunity to buy this pizza business. I'm so excited about it. 16. So I have a 16-year-old. I have others too, but my youngest, I can't even imagine her coming home and telling me this. And if I'm going to buy this business, Dad, and I'm going to help out the family, and I play football, so if you just work football Friday nights, I'll come in afterwards and I'll close and I'll work every night after football practice, but I need your help. And my grandpa, who after the military owned his own grocery store, and that didn't work out so well, so then he became a butcher, and he had 2 jobs, and my grandma stayed at home with the 5 kids. My grandpa's like, red? No, not so much. My dad has red hair, not anymore, but red hair. And he's like, you're gonna stay in school, you can continue to work, but you're gonna stay in school and you're gonna get your college education. You're gonna be the first to graduate with a college education out of our family, so that's not gonna happen. So my dad continued to work, and while he continued to work, he continued to experience things that he saw maybe were not necessarily of the utmost principles and integrity. And so by the time he was 18, he was a sophomore at The Ohio State University, and he always says if he didn't go into business, he would have gone to an accounting. But he had an opportunity at 18 to buy the business again. So at this time, the business had kind of deplenished, and the owner was selling it to the first person that would come up with an amount, and the amount was $1,300. So my dad was so excited this time. He's like, I know I can come up with $1,300. He went to his dad and borrowed $600. He went to my mom's dad. They weren't married yet, but my mom is who he was dating, and my mom is an alumni of Otterbein. I can't say the Otterbein University. And so he was dating my mom and borrowed money from her dad, and really then decided that he was going to go into business for himself. But what he wanted to do wasn't just about serving pizza. It was about serving people, and it was about having a place where people could come to work and they were going to learn values very early on. And so he bought the name Donato's from a gentleman by the name of Don Potts. Now, Don Potts, if you're familiar, those of us in Columbus, lived on the south side. He made pizzas out of his home. He served his pizzas to Kelly's and Planks, if you're familiar with Kelly's and Planks, yay, right? Good South End people and pizza. And so he sold his pizza to those establishments, and Don Potts named it Donato's because he was in the seminary and he was studying theology, and Donato's is a Latin derivative, and Donato's means to give a good thing. So my dad knew Grote Pizza probably wasn't going to be the best name, although my grandpa wanted him to name it that. And so he asked Don Potts if he could buy the name from him, and Don Potts was settling out of that position of selling pizza, so he said yes. So that's how we got the name Donato's. Now, truth be told, we did not even know what it meant. So in the world of just good marketing, Dad knew Donato's was a much better name than Grote Pizza. And so it wasn't until, and we didn't want to name it Potts Pizza, right? Because it was the 60s, and that wouldn't be very cool either. So in the world where, as a young entrepreneur going into business, he bought the name, he bought the sign. We had the original contract. I think it's copied in the book. It's like 12 pizza pans and all the little things that you need in order to do it. But he really was doing it and went into business for the sole purpose to promote goodwill through his product, his principles, his people, and service. And that truly, although we didn't write it down until 1986, was really why my dad wanted to go in business. And it was really important for him to create a business where you could do that. Well, where I came in, so there's 4 of us. I have an older brother, a younger sister, and a younger brother. And they're doing crazy things now, I'll tell you. It's fun. But all of us were in the business. And so we lived right behind our very first restaurant on Thurman Avenue on the south side of Columbus. And my dad, his very first storefront pizza place was across the street in front of my grandpa's plumbing shop, which is kind of gross. But my grandpa, my mom's dad, owned a Bauman Plumbing, so owned a plumbing shop. And so he said, I got this perfect spot for you. You can set up your pizza place. He originally was going to set it up for my mom to be a beautician. And my mom didn't want to be a beautician. She wanted to go to college. And so he's like, no, Nancy, you can be a beautician. She's like, I don't want to. So my grandpa's like, okay, Jim, I got this perfect spot for you. You can set up a pizza place. I already got the sinks and everything. And so my dad started out there, and every single night, and this is about the time when he started having children, but he would sit out on this windowsill, you can barely see it there, of the windowsill of this storefront, and he would visualize across the street a freestanding building, and not just, it's a black brick building, but he would visualize the customers standing in line. He would visualize the associates with smiles on their faces. So if you think about that today, that's the power of positive thinking, right? So Think and Grow Rich, all of the things that we know today in the power of positive thinking, but it's about really picturing your future and then writing down your goals and what you want to do and how you see yourself, but not just a building, but what those people look like coming in and out of that building, and did they have smiles on their faces, and were they happy, and were the associates happy? So a couple years go by, and he builds his first Donato's, and it's a black brick building. It's still there today on Thurman Avenue. It's our very first restaurant. And what he didn't do, and I don't know why, is he built this beautiful freestanding building, and he did not build a dining room in it. But he decided that it would be a good idea for us to live right behind the restaurant so that he could have easy access to the restaurant itself. So we lived in a house right behind the restaurant, and every single night, this is my childhood, every night when people would come and pick up their pizza, Dad would say, hey, so glad you're here. Go back and see Nancy and the kids. Super cool, right? Like being a kid growing up, and our living room was full of people every single night, which was a wonderful experience. And I credit so much to my mom, because those of you in this audience that know my mom, she always opened the door, always. And imagine running a family. She had 4 children, always opening the door to our customers. And we got to know our customers. They became our family. They became our friends. And to this day, we still are in touch with so many of those people who literally lived in our living room with us. Now, there are stories where there are also times we'd get up and go to school. I went to St. Mary's. My brother went to Corpus Christi. And there were still people in our house. I don't know why. They were playing cards. They were having fun. But that became the environment in which I grew up as a child. So one of the things that I remember distinctly growing up is my sister and I shared a room. And we would look out a picture window every single night. It was a small little picture window. And every night we would see all the commotion after we were supposed to go to bed. And we'd see all the commotion and the delivery drivers going down the alley and the customers coming in and out of the house, and really the energy. So imagine the energy of a restaurant, and every single day that's in our house. And late at night, Dad would come and get us, and we would stand under this big sign, and it had those blinking lights, and literally would blink up our bedroom at night. And so every night he would come get us, and I remember being about 8, 9 years old, standing in our pajamas under the sign, and my dad saying, we used to call them sermons. He would always have these tidbits of sermons and important information. And he would say, one day we're going to be around the world, and we're going to be in Germany, and we're going to be in Italy, and we're going to be all over the United States, and we're going to be the best on every block. And he never said, we're going to be the richest, we're going to sell our business, we're going to make millions. He always said, we're going to do it with principles, and we're going to treat people right, we're going to treat others the way that we want to be treated. And that's, as a family, how we grew up, and making sure that we took care of the community and our neighbors, who became our customers, who became our family, who became our friends, and taking care of the associates that worked for us, and taking care of the neighborhood around us. So we started to grow. So he opened up in 1963, so about 52 years ago, as a young man. And a real pivotal point in our history is he decided to grow. He wanted to have some more stores, right? Because we're going to grow around the world. So he decided to open one up in Grove City and one up in Whitehall. And he opened up these other 2 stores. And baby monitors weren't in then, but he had this intercom system, which I think he jerry-rigged. And any day he ever took off, he would sit in his recliner, if it was a Sunday afternoon, and he would listen to the commotion that was going on at the restaurant. A little bit of a control freak, maybe. He's an entrepreneur. But if things weren't going right, he'd run over to the restaurant, and he'd tell them what needed to happen, et cetera. But as he opened up these other 2 restaurants, people would call him and say, hey, Red, I just got a pizza at your Grove City location, and I'm telling you what, it is not the same. They ran out of pepperoni, and they put salami on it. They ran out of provolone cheese, so they put Romano cheese on it. It is not the same. So my dad made the very smart decision then to close both those restaurants down, go back to his first restaurant, and he decided, I'm not doing this again until I can open up a restaurant that's going to be the exact same every single time. So funny, years later, McDonald's comes along, right? But the whole idea was about consistency, making sure that that product that we sell our customers is the same every single time in every single restaurant. So then he went to work on, in his mind, and we tease him because we believe he has obsessive-compulsive pizza disorder. When he drives, his steering wheel is a pizza, and his wheels are a pizza, everything he does is a pizza, and how to make it consistent, and making sure that we believe every time we sell you a pizza, it's an unwritten contract that you'll get that same pizza every single time, and that means served the same way. It's quite a commitment that we're trying to carry on. But that's our commitment, is that we have the same product every single time, and that we treat you the same way every single time. So he went to work in his brain on this piece of equipment. This is back in the early 70s, called the Pep-O-Matic. And he basically believes, because he sliced the pepperoni with a paring knife every night. So you can imagine, we put 100 pieces of pepperoni on our pizza, right? That takes a lot of slicing, and he would do it with a paring knife. And so some would be thick, some would be thin, and we weigh all of our toppings to 1/100th of a pound. So if you weigh your toppings on a scale, and some thick or some thin, and it doesn't look right, and you're OCPD, that's a problem. So he went to work on a piece of equipment, a Pep-O-Matic, where you put the pepperoni sticks on the top, manually slice it over a blade, the pizza goes underneath it, and the pepperoni falls on the pizza. So he thought, this had not been invented yet, right? So he put it together on a garbage can prototype. Sounds gross, I know. And he would drag it, he did it in the shed, and he would drag it in the restaurant, and he would tell everybody, I've got this, don't worry about it, I'm going to slice all the pepperoni, and springs would pop out of it. It was a huge piece of equipment. And it wouldn't work, and all the guys who still work with us now, someone earlier said they met Roger Howard, Willie Webb, Dennis Forker, they all still work with us, would laugh at him. He'd take it back out into the alley and he'd work on it some more. Well, my grandpa, who happened to work at Kroger, a deli manager, came to my dad and said, you know, if you could automate that, you could sell that to all frozen pizza companies throughout the United States. And I tell this story for a specific reason. So my dad then he got an engineer involved. He went out to Tony's Pizza in Kansas. He was 30 years old. He had a VW bus. He loaded it up in the bus, took it out there, and basically showed them the technique and the technology that he believed could happen with this piece of equipment. They said, how many do you think we need? There were still people slicing by hand, putting on by hand on all the conveyors for frozen pizza. My dad said, 6. So the guy said, okay. So my dad then went, okay, now I got to automate it. Got my uncle involved, got it automated, and that then started what is now a branch of our company. It's called the Grote Manufacturing Company. We're located in Gahanna, and it's a $75 million revenue stream. They now have 20 different patents on different food processing equipment. So they do everything from, they're international, they're in Germany. They do everything from slicing pepperoni, we do Bob Evans sausage, we do White Castle's hamburgers in the frozen section of the grocery store. We do almost any bacon you can think of. I know it's not heart healthy maybe, but we love bacon because that feeds a lot of our equipment on the Grote manufacturing side. So my cousin, Bob Grote, runs that company. And it was an important part of our history, mostly because the whole idea of the Grote Manufacturing Company was to ensure the consistency of the Donatos product. So while a great company was born out of it, the whole idea of it was to make sure that we could provide a consistent product every single time. So we started to grow in the 1980s. We went on TV. We had 25 stores. Those were the days that you could go on TV and you would see 26% sales increase, which was awesome. And then in the 90s, we continued to grow. We started franchising, which was a great learning experience. Any of you that have business out there and you decide to franchise, it's like having a child and then letting them go off to college, which I've done, which is hard, right? You're kind of like, okay, I think you're an adult, you can do this. Well, that's what franchising is like. When you have a business and you're letting someone else run the business, you have to trust. It's a 20-year partnership with them that they're going to run the business with the same people values and the same product processes that you have. So we started franchising. It was successful. We had about 145 stores. We were growing in 1990s. 1999, we started talking about how are we going to continue to grow? What's our best growth strategy? I was our chief people officer. My brother was our chief operations officer, true family business, right? My mom was our human resource person at the time, and training and development and real estate. Most of our real estate in Columbus, my mom picked out. She's cool. And my sister was in catering, and my younger brother tried to show up to work. He's 9 years younger than me. Sometimes didn't. I had to fire him like 3 times. Which is not fun to do in a family business, and he kept coming back, and then I kept firing him. But we were all in the business. We had lots of relatives, lots of cousins, lots of aunts, lots of uncles, all in the business. So I think before we sold to McDonald's, it was a very family business, ones you would see today that are generation 1, generation 2, generation 3. We were truly a family business. Talking about our growth strategy. So we talked about an IPO. We talked about going public. We talked about angel investors. We talked about continuing to franchise, never talked about selling. It wasn't something that we sat around the table and said, wow, now that we built this business up, let's sell it and get our money off the table. It was never an exit strategy. Wasn't anything we ever thought of. We were talking to Dave Thomas at the time about co-branding, so with Tim Hortons, like they did with Tim Hortons, about co-branding real estate, but never selling. And then all of a sudden, we had, I'll talk about my role real quick, but we had McDonald's approach us. And so my role at the time when McDonald's approached us was that I was our chief people officer. And I talk about it in the book, the role of a chief people officer, but I think I was blessed because honestly, I grew up in the business. I worked in the stores. I worked summers. I worked weekends. I worked during college and after college. I didn't know really what human resources was supposed to be. I graduated from the Ohio State University in organizational design and communication, so you should say, well, you should have learned it during school. But what I did know was people were important in our business. So I defined my role, and I had to interview for it with my mom and my dad, and there were 2 other candidates, and I was very nervous, but I did get the job. And so but my whole role, I felt, was we have to keep our culture, and culture can be defined as so many different things, right? But truly, culture is the soul of your business. So just like family, just like your family changes, you have births and deaths and marriages and remarriages, and my family's crazy big and crazy. We have stepchildren, step everything. But it's truly like a business, and the culture of your family, the spirit, the love, the soul, is still there, no matter what your family looks like, just like a business. The soul is still there, no matter what it starts to look like. So we believed that it was that important for us to make sure that we maintain that soul as we continue to grow. So I went and met with Chick-fil-A, if you're familiar with Chick-fil-A. Like them or not like them, like their values or not like their values. What they did do was grow a business based on some solid values that they don't veer from. Also Southwest, like them or not like them, they have some solid values that they continue to hold true to. And so how do you grow your business and keep your soul? That was my main role. And then all of a sudden, McDonald's calls us, and they fly us out to Chicago, still not looking to sell, but looking to grow. They fly us out to Chicago, and it's my dad and my brother and myself, and they, on a private plane, which is really weird, and I'd never been on a private plane before, and it was kind of creepy weird. Like, it was as big as this room. It was huge. And so we sit down with Jack Greenberg, who's the CEO of McDonald's. He's sitting way far at the end of the table, and we're thinking, because at that time they had invested in Chipotle, they had invested in Boston Market, they had invested in Fazoli's, that there was some interest in maybe investing in us. Well, we learned that day was they had been to every 145 restaurants of ours. They identified us as best in class. They narrowed their search down to 60 different pizza companies, and after visiting every one of ours, decided we had best in class people and best in class pizza. Consistency, right? And so then Jack Greenberg says they want to buy the whole thing. And so while we're sitting around this table, and my older brother, brilliant guy, he's always that world vision, like, we're going to grow 2,000 stores by 2000. We're going to be around the world. And I was always, we got to keep the culture. My dad's like, okay, let's figure out the best way to do this. And so I don't have a good poker face, so I got teary-eyed and emotional. My brother's like, yes. My dad just sat there. And it was such a shock to us. So we left, we fly back, we meet with the family. It literally took us 3 months to decide whether or not we were going to sell. And McDonald's whole strategy was right, and this was back in the late 90s, right? So they wanted meal occasion strategy. Their whole strategy was to have the chicken business, the Mexican business, the Italian business, and the pizza business, as well as the hamburger business. And so their stock was high. They were doing acquisitions all the time. We decided, we weighed all the pros and the cons, and when you look at why would you sell your family business to the world's largest restaurant company, and you weigh all the pros to that and all the cons, and all the pros are great, right? Capital infusion, we really have the capital to grow with, we've got access to training and people and resources and real estate, things we'd never have access to. And the cons, are we going to be able to keep our spirit and our soul? We're merging with the world's largest restaurant company. Can we keep our soul? And so after 3 months, really deciding that it was probably good for us to sell to McDonald's. So we sold in 1999. This was quite an experience. So I talk a lot about it in the book, but for me personally and professionally, it was an incredible experience. So living under the arches, we learned a lot. First thing that we learned is the difference between a private and public company. And you can read all about the differences in a private and a public company, but when you're a private family business, our investments, we never made distributions to family, so we weren't getting distributions. All I knew was we looked really good on paper, and I paid a lot in taxes, and I got a salary. That was it. And so while we were a private company and we always invested in the long term, what I learned under McDonald's, and just could be any public company, was the importance of the quarter and the street, and how sometimes we made decisions that didn't make sense to me, and because we had to make earnings by the quarter, and we had to look good for the street. And so there were so many times that we got a new CEO, we got 27 new vice presidents, we grew our overhead by, 28%. So our G&A, what it cost us to run 145 restaurants before, was about $10 million. That then grew to $32 million just to run the stores, same number of stores, right? We started doing all this research on who are our customers, and this great research. But we had to make decisions that were by the quarter, which was a very big learning for me, as well as really just living in the business. The other piece of that is the difference between business intuition and business case. So while we hired 23 new vice presidents, we had a new CEO on board, we had all these people literally, I came back from maternity leave, and I was our chief people officer still, and I was introducing myself to people. I was like, hey, I'm Jane, I'm the people person, and you are? Okay, and here's your drug test. It's funny if you saw Undercover Boss, right? Here's your drug test, what's your role, what do you do? Just trying to catch up with the business, and we were growing so fast. We were opening stores. We were redefining our concept to be a different concept. Some of you probably experienced it. It was a concept where you walk in and you sit down and there was a telephone at the table. So that was under the arches where we thought we could really attract customers into the dining room by having a phone at the table. So it worked really good on Friday nights when people were just ordering, and on Sundays when you came in and we weren't busy, and I'd say, hi, welcome to Donato's. Have you ordered with us before? Go ahead and have a seat. When you're ready, go ahead and pick up the phone and call me, and we'll take your order. And they would do it, and then I'd have to run back to the kitchen and answer the phone. That didn't work out so well. So that was really the difference between business intuition and business case. There was all this business case to tell us why that was the right thing to do. We spent millions of dollars on a focus group to say that was the right thing to do. But when you get down to really doing business and you're interacting with your customers, it wasn't the right way to build our concept. But finally, most importantly, is the culture. So I'm supposed to be our chief people officer. I'm supposed to be in charge of our culture. I'm supposed to have the keys. And I start going into living in a really weird place during this time because my experiences became very different than they were as a family business. But what we know that it has to have a process. Culture has to have a process. And it's not the soft stuff. It has to have a process. Just like we make a pizza, we're very meticulous in the way we make our pizzas. We have to have the same meticulous process for our people. And it is about selection. It is about interviewing. It is about onboarding. And I'll talk a little bit about millennials today. It is about your first day, because a lot of millennials make their decision whether or not they're going to stay with you on their very first day. It's about your first day of work. Then it's about training. Then it's about succession planning. It's about development. And you have to have all those processes in place, but you have to have people behind it in order to bring it to life. And that's really an important part of growing your business. And so part of the personal learnings that I had during this time, and McDonald's was a great company. They taught us a lot. They really did. They taught us about real estate. They taught us about the drive-through. They taught us about ergonomics, right? Like, what's the best way to get the pizza from this end of the kitchen to that end of the kitchen, the least amount of steps that you have to take, all those things which are wonderful things, and they really did teach us a lot about a business. The people side of it got lost. And not because McDonald's was lost in the people side, because they're a great company, but the people side of it on our company got lost. And part of that had to do with the leadership, and I take responsibility for that. So the 4 things that I learned during that time I talk about in the book is how important these 4 C's are. It's character, it's courage, it's conviction, and it's compassion. And when I talk about character, it's about being authentic and transparent and honest and making sure that you're humble and that you have humility, and if you make a mistake, you admit the mistake and you don't do it again. And during some of my experiences, although I thought I had character, what happened to me was I lived in a world that was very different, and it became very political. So political can be good or bad. I won't talk about politics, but political in a business can be good or bad. And the culture of our company and the spirit of our company and the soul of our company, the flame was starting to dim. And part of that in my own self was dimming. And one experience I had in particular was our new CEO. When he came on board, note to self, don't do this. So he came on board, he sat in a table, and it was my dad and my brother and I was our chief people officer, and I just got back from maternity leave, so I wanted to let him know. He had to go work in the stores. Here's his shirts. Here's his drug test. Haha. Here's his training schedule. This is what he needs to do. And he just slid them across the table and looked at me, and he goes, I don't think you understand. I'm going to be the CEO of this company. I don't have time to work in the stores. I was like, I don't think you understand. You're not going to be the CEO of this company. And I didn't think he was. until you fulfill our mission and promise. You have to work in the stores. Like that's what we do. We're in the service business. That's how we survive. He pushed him back to me and he goes, no, I don't think you understand. And he got up and walked out. Right? Like I was like, okay, this is going to be different. And so my dad and my brother are just sitting there, and I recognized then that this was going to be a very different experience. And as time goes on, we were in a meeting, and he was a good guy. His name is Bill. He's a really good guy. I think he was trying to be a leader that he emulated from other people instead of being truly the leader that he could be from within. And that is a big difference. And so we were in a meeting one time, and he was sitting at the end of the table, and we had all our 28 new vice presidents, and I was sitting at the table, and those are the really crazy times. We had this big conference room table, and we had front rows and back rows, which I hate that. Like, can't everybody sit in the front row? And why is this, if you're this position, you sit in the back row? And one by one, he would have everybody go up and stand at the end of the room. And so one by one, everybody's standing at the end of the room, and the two people left sitting at the table were Roger Howard and myself. Now, Roger had been with us for 40 years at the time, and I had been with us my whole life. And Bill says at the end of the table as the CEO, he says, everybody standing at the end of the room, you're safe, you have a job, you're doing great. People left sitting at the table, you need to think about putting your resume together and looking for a job. I was like, oh my gosh, I think he's talking about us. So he gets up and leaves the room. I get up and I go follow him, and this is when I still had a voice. Follow him into his office. I was like, Bill, what was that? Like, why did you just do that? Now, side note, I had an employment agreement, so I can't say I was truly worried about my job, but what I was worried about was the message he just sent to those 28 people standing at the end of the room. And he said, oh, no, you're fine. You're doing great. You're awesome. Don't worry about you. I just wanted to send a message to the people at the end of the room that they don't have a job, that it's not safe just because you're family or just because you've been here forever. So I want to make sure they know that everybody's at risk. I was like, wow. Well, you didn't, okay, but you just sent those people in fear is what you did. And so while I'm having these experiences very different, I grew up being able to go talk to my dad and tell my dad my opinions respectfully, not always, but tell my dad what I thought or what we should do different, and my brother and my mom, and all of a sudden I started to lose my voice. And so, which is why the second C to me is so critical. Having courage. I thought at the beginning I had courage and I would go and I would stand up, and then I got shot down. And it happened those two times. And what happened is I started backing off and I started losing my voice. And I no longer had the courage to stand up for what I thought was right for the company or for what I thought was right for me. And I think character is so important. And even though I thought I had character, I totally lost my voice. I lost my courage to have my voice. And having courage is so much more than just that, right? It's about having the courage to live your values out loud. Whoever you are, whatever you're made of, whatever you believe, it's having courage to live those values out loud. It's having courage to learn. It's having courage to make mistakes. It's having the courage to say, I don't know. And one of the meetings, these are all the little things that I learned. I was sitting in a meeting, and my dad was in the meeting. We were going over financials, and my dad's like, do you understand, Jane? Which I hated when he did that to me. Do you understand this, Jane? And I was like, yes, I understand it, Dad. And I had to walk away, and I really did not. I had no idea. And so I then, during that time, lost my courage to even say, you know what, I don't know. I'm not sure what this is. So having courage to be able to say, I don't understand. It doesn't make me dumb. It just makes me want to learn and be curious to grow. So having the courage to take risks is so important in business, and standing up for who you are. So oftentimes we know people who have character, but if you don't have the courage to live your character out loud, then you're in conflict with yourself, and you're not going to be able to be the best you that you can be. So then my third one is conviction during that time. And as I watched my brother left the company, he's like, this isn't for me. My sister left the company. She's like, this is not for me at all. My little brother still was fired, right? So he still wasn't coming in. So he's out in Colorado on a ranch. And so I'll tell you that story with Undercover Boss. And so learning really how important it was to do what you do because you love it, And when you wake up and you're excited about what you do, then you're going to be successful. And as I talk about when we bought the company back, it's one of those things I had to really check myself with, is making sure that I was doing it because I loved the business and not because I was trying to make my dad proud, or not because of any other reason than I loved what we did. And so my son has 5 Snap Fitness gyms. He's doing it because he loves it. But having conviction about what you do and being able to make sure that you're doing it with purpose and finding out what your true purpose is. So oftentimes, and I try not to do this with my kids, I have 3. I have one getting ready to go off to college, and then a sophomore, 2 daughters, and then my son. And trying not to influence them. And my whole goal has always been, do what you love in life. But yet my daughter on her college essay still wrote, everybody still thinks I should go in the family business, right? Like, it becomes this thing when you're in a family business, this unwritten thing that people feel like they have to go in the family business. And our goal has been to make sure that our children, that our people that work for us are really, truly doing it because that's what they love to do. And the last one is compassion. And I'm just going to say love, right? Like, I don't think we talk about love enough. And it's loving one another. It's loving one another as you love yourself. It's treating others the way you want to be treated. It's just love. It's unconditional love. Now, oftentimes our mission statement to promote goodwill through our product and principles, people, and service would get used against us as like, oh, well, you can't do that because that's not promoting goodwill. So same thing. Well, that's not love. Well, love is being honest with people. Love is making sure that we're helping people learn and develop and grow. Love sometimes means people become alumni of our organization because they're going to be better off somewhere else. And we call it alumni. We don't terminate people. Love is making sure we use the right language when we're talking to people. But love is really kind, and we're in the service business. So our means of serving others is through pizza. This is what we do. We serve other people, but we do it through pizza. So as one of my McDonald's stories is, we had to do our layoff for the first time, which was really hard. We'd been in business for over 40 years. We'd never had to lay anybody off. And McDonald's stock started really taking a dip. What happened was we were very profitable when we sold. The next year we were with them, we were losing $32 million, which is a lot. And then we were losing $28 million, and we had to do a big right sizing. Well, I learned it's not right sizing if you have to do it again. It wasn't right in the first place. So, but in that, because we'd never done it before, I did all this research, and I read Jack Welch, Straight from the Gut, which is a good book. I didn't like everything in it, but one of the things I learned was the kindest thing you can do for someone is to be honest, and I wish he would just add a statement with compassion. Because you can be brutally honest with people, right? Like, you can have the courage to say exactly what you're thinking, but if you don't do it with compassion, then we're not mutually having a good conversation, and it's not respect and dignity. So compassion in our business is critical. So McDonald's stock dove. So as we started doing layoffs, 2011, 9/11 hit, and things started going south, and McDonald's started getting all this heat on, you got to focus on your business, get out of all these other brands. So they spun off Chipotle, they got out of Boston Market, they got out of Fazoli's, and rumor hit the street that they were going to sell Donato's. And so it's February, and Dad comes in my office, and he just looked at me. We both heard at the same time. I was like, come on, Dad, we got to buy it back. Like, we have a destiny, and it's to be a prosperous, principle-based company for 100 years and beyond, and we're only 50 years in this. So we got a destiny. Let's buy this back, and I'll do everything I can. I'll get people together. I'll get a team together. I'll sell my house because I just built one. I'll do everything I can, but I really need you because you're super smart, and you're a really great leader, and I really need your money because I don't have enough. So he said, without blinking, absolutely. And I think in the back of his mind, he was probably thinking, gosh, I did this once. But yes, let's do it again. So we put a team of people together. It was an awesome experience. October 28th, we presented in front of the McDonald's brand. Our CFO at the time presented a plan to close all the restaurants, shut it down, sell all the assets. And I presented the plan that our team put together. I just got to present it. And that was to let us buy the company back for pennies. So it's a really good story. We sold high, we bought low, right? So that was not a bad thing. So we bought the company back. And I think the most amazing thing for us, first of all, we had to make more money, not just more dough, not more dough in the stores. We had to make more money. And you're going to have to give me a time check because I'll keep talking. We were losing $10.5 million when we bought the company back. So many people said to me, like, why did you buy it back? Well, we had 5,000 people that were employed that were counting on us. And we have a great product, and we do good things with the profits from our company and giving back to the community. And I honestly, when you're so convicted about something, I didn't even think about it. I was like, we're absolutely buying this company back. My brother had left the company, started his own company. My sister is an artist in Florida. My brother's in Colorado. And I said, I'm the last one standing, Dad, so let's do this. We bought the company back, and that first year we had a $10.5 million turnaround. And I think the most important thing about that is we didn't change the product. There wasn't, and I will say, we had customers say to us when we sold, oh, you changed the product, I don't like it anymore. But we didn't change the product. Then when we bought it back, we had all these customers like, yes, you bought it back. So excited, the product's so much better. I'm like, we still didn't change the product. So it's so interesting how delicate a brand is. It's so delicate. And it's twofold, right? It's the perception of the customer about the company itself and who the company stands for, but it's also about the people. And I truly believe, because we didn't change, we had to go to work on a lot of things, selling off lots of assets. We had 75 empty restaurants sitting there that we got the restaurants, but they were not running, operating. So just buildings we had to sell off. We were in all these contracts we had to get out of. We had a new concept that we wanted to come up with. And I went to focus on just, let's rebuild our brand. And the very first thing we said was, everybody turn around. Because during the McDonald's days, good or bad, everybody was facing their boss. Me in particular. I was always worried about, I started working in fear, and I started worrying about what my boss was thinking and where he was and what he was doing and whether he was going to take training away from me and who was going in his office. And that's never happened to me before. And so I learned and understood what it felt like to work in an environment where there was fear. And again, not fear that I was going to lose my job, but it became more about me. I allowed the situation to define it, to become about me and who I was going to be, instead of about our mission and our promise and what I could do to really be a portal to allow our culture to grow and to prosper. And so when that happened, I woke up, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I was working at 3 o'clock in the morning, actually, and I read Desiderata, and it was like the lights come on. Have you ever had those moments where, like, you're just working towards something, and it's a little gray, and when you're working in fear, you're paralyzed, you can't think clearly, you're working harder, you're working more hours, you're not making good decisions, and you're paralyzed, is where I was. And then the lights came on, and all of a sudden it hit me and dawned on me that I was not operating with integrity. I was not operating in a way that was aligned with my values and who I was and what I wanted to be. And so it was important for me to shift and to really get aligned with who I am and what my purpose is and what my conviction is. But it was our people that made the difference. Our people started caring again. Now, whether or not they started caring because the fear of, oh, we're going to close all the restaurants because all that went out there, or whether or not they really, truly just started caring about what they did, but that's what made the $10.5 million turnaround. So what we recognize is every single piece in our business is important, and that is, I don't want to call it a campaign because it's not a campaign, but it's truly, every piece is important. Now, it means everything. It means on-time delivery. It means your pizza's right. It means we made it right, so you don't have to call us back. It means when we delivered it, we brought everything, right? Sometimes that doesn't happen. It means the delivery driver that brought it to you is smiling and in uniform and happy, and that we're treating him right. And it means for that delivery driver that he's whole and that we're taking care of the whole person and that he's able to come to work that day and be able to be himself and trust the environment. That's every piece is important. So we most recently started working on our concept. It's opened up at Short North, and so it's kind of our new expression of the same old Donatos. So we have vegan pizza there, we have gluten-free pizza there, we have a non-GMO pizza there, we have live music there, we have local craft beer there. Super cool if you haven't checked it out. So that's our expression of Donatos, and building buildings is important, and we're opening up in Nashville on February 1st. But if you don't put the right people into that building, then you really have a building without a soul. And so making sure that we build a building and we build our culture with the right people. I'm just going to talk quickly about what does that mean. We want to be that best restaurant on that block where we treat everybody with respect and dignity. That's important to us. Our goal is to be the best workforce on that block. as we continue to grow. So we've got a whole new culture today, and I know some of you are in the audience, and this is my daughter on Instagram, right? So, and she works at Donato's, but we have this whole new culture, and so a culture today is very different than the culture was 35 years ago as we were trying to build it, just like families. So we're all growing into, we have 4 different generations working with us now. So from baby boomers to Gen X to millennials and the upcoming ones. But this year, the millennials we have more millennials than we have baby boomers this year. Next year, by the year 2017, 25% of our workforce is going to be millennials. So we have to learn a lot about this next generation, just like anyone else. They're going to spend $240 billion in the United States this year, which is amazing. Millennials are awesome. They've had very different life experiences than my generation and my dad's generation. So they saw the Challenger explosion, the Berlin Wall fall. They saw September 11th, as we all did. And they had a terrorist attack in a very different way. And they're very different. So parenting trends are very different today. When we did, there's a great book called, I'll get it to you, I forget. But it's all about millennials. And they did all this research on millennials. And the way that we parent today is very different, right? I know the way I parent is different than my parents parented. They worked so hard to give us a good life that they were never there. Well, they were there. I just had to go into the restaurant and see them. But they worked so hard. And I know my generation was all about, you know what, I don't have to do that for my kids. I want my kids to be able to learn and grow. And so therefore, then, parenting trends change. And technology is so different. I learn every day from my children what is new and what is different with technology. So I would say characteristics of our new generation that's coming into our workforce is a sense of entitlement. So that you could say entitled, but it's truly, in all the research, it's delayed adulthood. So I know, well, when I was 11, I had to go to work. I know a lot of people in my generation who had to go to work at 18. So when you're 18, you're out of the house, you're going to work. Well, now what we're finding is many times millennials will say, when do you become an adult? And the answer was 27. That's when I become an adult. And it's by no fault of their own, right? Because as parents, we're saying, sure, come on back and live at home until you get your career, until you get on your feet. And so parenting trends are just very, very different. There's also very tech dependence. So it's not about figuring out the technology, but very tech dependent. And so I know now when I need to, as a manager, talk to my associates, the last thing you want to do is call a millennial. You don't want to call them because that's interrupting them. You can text them all day long, right? You can Facebook, you can Instagram, you Snapchat. Snapchat's so interesting. You can do all those things, but don't call them. I don't call my kids because they don't answer. If I text, they answer. Snapchat, they answer. So learning the difference on how to run a business today, so we can have this whole new concept, but we have to manage our people different. And that's a lot of what we've been working on, is how do we manage differently in today's environment? Because technology is exponential. The growth in technology is changing our world. Another great book is Exponential Organizations, and it's all about the Ubers of the world, the Twitters, all of that, and it's incredible. So you got to figure out what's disrupting your business, but first and foremost, we have to look inside and say, how do we embrace this generation, and how do we help them work with baby boomers? They're also outcome driven, which is awesome. How cool is that? We want a job force, a workforce that's outcome driven, and they also care about social responsibility, which is awesome. And that makes our job really helps us, because who we are as a company, and who many of you are as a company, is we are a company that gives back. We're a company that wants to be fun. We're a company that cares about our people, as well as. So making sure that we're creating an environment that is welcoming to all generations is important to us. And just a really quick, one of the things we did this last year is we invested in 54 new training positions. And so this is part of the process we put in place. And then we also did the first 10-day work shift. So giving me my son's experience working for Donato's, he went to work, he was 14. He came home, I said, when are you working next? Don't know. Okay, call the store. Okay, I don't know. My daughter, who's 14 today, or a couple years ago, her first job, she gets her first 10-day shift. She brings it home, she has to sign it off by the parent, so that there's this communication, so it's clear, expectations are clear. It's made a huge difference for us. Our turnover went down 42%, which was a savings of $367,000. So in your process, showing an ROI is really important, but so important to invest in the right things to make sure that your people culture is alive and you're doing the right things. So then, and I talk about people and I talk about turnover, and that leads me to my experience on Undercover Boss. People are an important part of our business, and a really good example of that is really giving people second chances. We've been hiring people that have had barriers to employment, have been incarcerated, have had backgrounds, all kinds of opportunities in their life, and I will give credit to my mom, who started that, who's a founding family member of Amethyst, which is a nonprofit, and believes in second chances. And so we've always believed in second chances. I didn't know any different. That's what we've always done. And so when Undercover Boss called, we did not call them, when they called and said, hey, do you want to do this show? We're like, I don't know yet. So they interviewed us and interviewed us and interviewed us, and they went to all of our restaurants and they interviewed all our associates. So the real story behind Undercover Boss, if you don't know, they categorized it as this restaurant documentary. So they were interviewing our people to say, hey, what's it like working in the restaurants? If you ever worked with a producer before, they can get anything out of you. So that's the stories they got. So they narrowed it down. They made me up. The whole process was 86 hours of filming to get 40 minutes, right? So we were deep in this. And I think for us as a company, when you weigh the pros and cons, it was like, gosh, we have an opportunity to help people. That's what the show is. It's an awesome show. And we have an opportunity to really to spread the mission of Donatos around the world, as long as nothing bad happens. And we did all the inventory of, okay, what could really bad happen? Well, we know we're not going to find the sexual harassment thing that they found on Hooters. I was pretty confident of that. I knew we wouldn't find product integrity issues like there were, I think it was Boston Market, where, someone was spitting on the food or something. We were pretty confident of those things. I had no idea my delivery driver would decide to tell me on national TV that he smoked pot with our customers. That was not in my, hey, here's all the things that could happen, ever. And so the rule is I could not have a phone. I lived in a hotel for 2 weeks. It's truly a lot of what you see. Our stores knew it was a reality show, but they thought it was a different one called The Startup. So all the buses pulled up and said Startup. Their badges said Startup. There were 2 camera crews in the kitchen at the same time. So one on another associate and another person that was an actor, one on me with my associate, and one on a hostess. So it was kind of like a Shark Tank thing constantly. There were people back and forth, back and forth. They would break in and say, we need to take you here to talk to the judges, et cetera. So my associates really, truly thought my name was Kathy and that I was going to get an opportunity to win my business if I could prove to them that I could make a pizza, which I really knew how to do. That was a hard thing to do. It was hard to go in and pretend to be someone else and to mess up on the pizzas. I really did mess up on them because I was nervous. And so they'd come to my hotel, they'd microphone me, make me up, and no phone, no lifeline, no nothing. So during that whole experience, when my delivery driver decided to tell me that, and some inside scoop is he was talking, and he's this great driver. If you saw the show, he's awesome. And his name's Aaron. He's still with us. He's at Short North. And he's a super cool kid. And he's just talking. He just lost 65 pounds. And I'm like, that's so cool. How did you lose 65 pounds? And if you saw the show, it wasn't just from running up to each house on delivery that he made me do. He's like, oh, I did this 4-day-a-week diet, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, that's cool. I go, I never heard of it. He goes, well, have you heard of kale? I go, this is a couple of years ago. I was like, yeah, actually, my brother lives in Colorado and he grows kale. Right? He goes, oh, he lives in Colorado. This is all on camera. They could have shown any of this. He goes, yeah, he lives in Colorado. He goes, couldn't he hook a brother up? I was like, what? Like, hook a brother up? He goes, Mary Jane, marijuana, pot. Can you get me some pot? I thought I was going to die. So the whole moment of mom first got in, like, are you driving? Are you high now? Like, get out of this car. What are you doing? To, oh my gosh, we're on national TV. So really conflicted, get back. It's 12:30 at night on campus. And the producer's there, and they've got the cameras on me. As soon as we get out of the car, they pull me over, boom. Like, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I really need to make sure he doesn't go back on the road. She's like, do you want to take your wig off and go in and fire him? I was really angry, truth be told. I was angry. And if you ask my kids, this is me angry. Like, I was angry. But I would never do that. I wouldn't go to a restaurant and fire one of our drivers. It's not my job to do. It's our manager's job to do. And I have to make sure we get them off the road, and I want to do the right things, but I would never do that. She asked me 6 times take your wig off, go in there and fire him. He put your company at risk. He did this, and I was like, that's not who we are. And so, I just remember going into this thing thinking, if we just do what we do, like, I think we'll be okay. So we decided, if you didn't see the show, we decided to fire him, but if he took a drug test, he could come back. If he took 6, he could come back and work as a delivery driver again, and that we would pay for his last year at Ohio State. So he did, and we did, and he's still working for us, and it's great, which is awesome. But it's about second chances, right? So we learned a lot about compassion, but truly from my mom, and it's truly, really, the history of our company and who we are. So quite an experience with Undercover Boss. Did not expect that. It was a great experience, though. We got to really reward some incredible people, and we're very blessed with that. The other thing that it allowed us to do was really give back to the community in such a really cool way. So we not only give back to our associates, but we then developed a Promise Family Fund. So if you bought a book tonight, the proceeds from this book, portion of it goes back to our Promise Family Fund for Donato's associates, like you saw in Undercover Boss, and a portion of it goes back to the Reeb Avenue Center, which I'll talk about here. And the Reeb Avenue Center is really where I've been spending the last 4 years, a lot of my time. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a nonprofit that we started on the south side of Columbus in conjunction with the city, in conjunction with other private donors, Tanny Crane, who's one of my best friends and mentors in business. And what we wanted to do is we canvassed the area, south side, this is all in the book, but 1 in 4 houses are boarded up. The unemployment is 22%. Child abuse and neglect is 3.4% higher than anywhere else in Franklin County. Infant mortality is 3% higher than anywhere else in Franklin County, which we know Ohio is the 3rd worst in the nation. And we're 2 miles down the road from Nationwide Children's Hospital, is this population where I grew up. And so as we start to look at the demographics and what's going on, we started with, hey, let's do a learning center and let's get these kids out of this old house and get them in the state-of-the-art learning center. But what we found out was, then what? Then they go home, and what's home? And what's home look like? And is it safe? And what are their parents doing? Are they working? So we have this really cool opportunity. After we surveyed the entire neighborhood, there are 5 things that they needed, but the 2 that we're focusing on is education and jobs. So Reeb Avenue Center is an elementary school that's been sitting vacant on Reeb Avenue on the south side of Columbus for 5 years. No vandalism, no broken windows, nothing touched, copper in the building, TVs in every room, nothing stolen. So the city acquired it, we renovated it, we raised $12.5 million, and our whole vision for this is to be a hub of hope for the community. And we have 13 nonprofits that are housed in this building, and every nonprofit is either focused on education or workforce development, every single one of them. So the important is, I dropped my daughter off at the Southside Learning Development Center as a mom or a dad or a grandma or an aunt or uncle. I can walk through the doors of the Reeb Avenue Center, and I can go to Godman Guild and get my GED. I can go to Digital Works and get training virtual training on a computer, and I get the computer at the end of my training. I can go to Alva's house. I can go to Amethyst. I can go to House of Hope. I can go to St. Stephen's. I can go to all these resources to help me find a job. And Amethyst and House of Hope are there because there's a lot of drug addiction going on, unfortunately, in this side of the town. So that's our mission, is to build a prosperous Southside community. We also have a cafe there, so if you're ever out and about on Reeb Avenue, I invite you to come to lunch at our, it's run by Mid-Ohio Food Bank. It's on the 1st floor. It's our community connectivity. It's awesome food. We have 2, besides Donatos, we have 2 executive chefs, and it's a pay it forward. So you'll come to lunch there. I just had lunch there today. And you will be sitting with homeless people. You'll be sitting with people in need. You'll be sitting with business people. And you'll have conversations you'll never thought you have had. But it's pay it forward. So if I'm food insecure and I can't afford to pay, I get a loyalty card. And if I go to Godman Guild, I get points, and I can come down and pay for food. If I go to St. Stephen's, or if I go to Amethyst, I can earn points. Or I can volunteer 1 hour, and I get a free meal. But they do it on a card, so no one knows anything. It all is on a card. Same thing with our fresh food market. So we have fresh food market, and fruits, vegetables, there's Donatos pizza, milk, eggs, cheese, available on SNAP programs, on loyalty programs, or you can pay it forward. So when I eat lunch there, I pay it forward and pay for the next person's meal. And so it's a wonderful cafe. It's really, I could go on and on, but I am out of time on this one. It is an opportunity to create a space where people are coming together and learning about each other and helping each other. So from the time that we open, we have a free community meal on Tuesday nights, but the time that we open, people are starting to dress differently. People are asking for help, because you have to build trust, asking for help and going through all the services in the program. So that's where I've been spending my time, other than this book, for the last 4 years, because it took that long to do the book too. And all of that is in the book. The most important thing about this was hard to do. It was really hard to do, and Debbie was a great partner, and Paul Otte, a great partner in it. And I say that it was delayed, I think, intentionally. It allowed us to talk about Undercover Boss. It also allowed us to talk about Reeb Avenue. We believe this is a national model, what we're doing on the south side of Columbus. We've had Washington, D.C. come in. We've got Head Start program there. We've been identified as one of 13 sites across the United States that people are looking at because it's a true private-public partnership. So I'm really super excited about it. Can't say much about it until 5 years from now when we see what happens to those kids and those parents and where they're at, but that's our goal there. So the proceeds from this book go to that, but also there's a free pizza in the back of the book. So you buy a book, you get a pizza. So I thank you so much for coming out on a cold night. I appreciate your time very much.